folks. Welcome to our next edition of our In the Lab. And this week, we're going to do our unfiltered session where we focus on topics, industry topics, fun topics, juicy topics, whatever kind of topic you want to fill in. We are going to focus on AI today, and we're going to be talking about how AI is going to impact in the enterprise, but also talk about some of the concerns, pro and cons, positive and negatives that AI is bringing to the table. And I got a great panel of guests today, and I'm excited to be joined by two gentlemen that I, respect and hold a lot of knowledge across the two of them. So first, my name is Pete Downing. I'm the host of our In the Lab sessions, and with me we have Mr. Johnny Brister and Mr. Vid Sista. Johnny, you want to give yourself a quick introduction, how you came about joining Alchemy, and you've had an interesting path.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So yeah, as Pete said, I'm the CISO here at Alchemy, but I come by way of many years in healthcare, where I've kind of done a variety of things over the years, but last few stints were for large health systems as their CISOs. So been around the block from that angle, got to see a lot of interesting stuff, as we'll probably share a few examples here. Some interesting stuff in the world of not only AI, but how it relates to population health or healthcare in general. But yep, kind of been through the customer side for quite a while. Happy to be here at Alchemy and be able to spread that knowledge and our experience across all of our customer base. Thanks, Pete.
Yeah, next up we have Vid. Vid Sista runs our office as a CTO, and Vid, tell us about yourself and how you came to join Alchemy.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. So I've been in the IT industry now 30 plus years. Started off as a consultant, doing implementations for a lot of customers with various different technologies. Kind of moved into a solution architect role, and over the years, practice lead over several different technologies. Prior to joining Alchemy, I was at another, value-added reseller, and just focused on several different technology areas, from the data center to cloud to security to networking. And then over the past several years, my focus has really been around automation, cloud, AI, and kind of the future of technology and where it's headed.
We're going to dive in and start talking about exploring enterprise AI and its implications, security, and the future. And with the first question is, hey, Vid, what is artificial intelligence? And we keep hearing a lot about it. I think in one of my emails, it's one of the top Google terms right now. I forget, it's like billions of searches of results. So what is artificial intelligence? Could you kind of give us the roadmap, and I'll bring up your first slide here.
Absolutely. I think the interesting thing is, when I talk to people about AI, it's not new. AI has actually been around since the 50s. The first chatbot was developed back in 1964. And you can kind of see a little bit of the evolution of AI. For whatever reason, in the 70s and 80s, I don't know if we were just partying too much, but there was literally no development around AI happening. But then around 1997, for those of you guys that remember, it was a big deal when Deep Blue, built by IBM, came out with this chess playing computer that beat Garry Kasparov. And I think that was, kind of the first time that I'd really taken notice about, AI. Obviously, there have been several movies throughout the years that talk about AI, but we really started to see some more of it developed in the industry, where things like a Roomba vacuum cleaner and Siri and Alexa, and so it's been pervasive throughout the several past few decades. It's just we never really looked at it or thought about it in the way that we do today. And I think part of that, if you go to the next slide. If you look at where we started to see AI really take notice, is in the reading comprehension and language understanding. When we start to leverage and evaluate AI, where we really care about it is it better than a human? If it's not going to be better than a human, it doesn't really provide as much value. And it was really within the past 5 years where we started to see speech, image, handwriting, language understanding, and reading comprehension, the things that we typically will do as a human when we interact with different systems. AI has actually surpassed human performance in a lot of those tests. And that's really why I think, now is really where we started to get a lot more attention within the past 5 years around AI. So there's a couple of different categories. Narrow and weak AI is pretty much everything that we deal with today. Siri, Alexa, the recommendations we get from Netflix or Amazon, and even generative AI like ChatGPT. Those are all considered narrow or weak. And then the second category is really artificial general intelligence. And I think this is where you're seeing some concern in the industry about should we slow down the pace of innovation and development around AI? Because if you've seen all the movies, when AI gets to this level or it's AGI, it's where it starts to take over and eliminate humans. We're not there yet. I think some folks are saying that we could be decades away from getting there. There's others that believe we'll never get there. But I think there is legitimate concern around the pace of acceleration with AI development. And we're leveraging AI to build more AI. And so it'll only continue to accelerate. But I think this is where the concern comes from, where, hey, should we slow down a little bit on this development? We don't want to build Skynet.
And yeah, so anytime we're talking about AI, there's always this term machine learning, right? So you talk to like one of our great vendors, Amelia, they talk about it learning, right? So what is machine learning and how does that play into AI? So
yeah, it's a great question. It's the foundation of AI, right? So all of these algorithms and models that are built to develop an AI are built on machine learning. And there's a few different categories, and I'll touch on just a few high level. Deep learning is the one that we're really starting to see leveraging these artificial neural networks, and it's kind of mirroring the brain, where it's starting to build its own, similar to like neurons firing synapses. And this is what's basically derived these different things like computer vision, natural language processing that we start to see more of today. The reinforcement learning, this is kind of where you get into things where you're training something or on a specific task, and it learns kind of through trial and error. I don't know if you guys ever watched the movie War Games way back in the 80s. I'm dating myself, but it was kind of having it play tic-tac-toe against itself over and over again to determine that, hey, there's no winning move. Like, you can't win, right? But teaching it how to do chess, teaching it how to do autonomous vehicles, and a lot of the robotics that we see today is based on trial and error. It's going to try something, and then it gets a reward or penalty based on the outcome, and then it continues to keep iterating until it learns, what is the optimal path for what it's trying to do. The next few, natural language processing and computer vision, this is really where we've seen significant advancements in the technology that we use today, or what we think of when we think of AI. Natural language processing is pretty unique in that it can take language translation from text to speech, speech to text, text to text. You can do things like what we do with Google Translate, things like that. A lot of our chatbots and virtual agents that we interact with is using that natural language processing. We're talking to it the way that we would talk to another human, and it is using that information to translate and try to understand what it is our intent, what are we trying to say. And the computer vision is the ability for it to see things and to be able to interpret what are those images. When we do things like on our iPhones, being able to unlock our phone with facial recognition and things like that, that's all AI on the back end, being able to recognize our face, being able to recognize images, things like autonomous drones, being able to see where it's going. So there's a lot of different things around natural language processing, computer vision that have been, kind of in the forefront of when we think of AI. And then expert systems are things that are specific to an industry. So you think about medical diagnosis, you're looking and training things on, using like radiology, for example, training a system on a massive amount of data to be able to look at images and detect and make diagnosis, things like financial planning. So there's different categories of machine learning, but they're all fundamental to artificial intelligence.
yeah, so that brings us to our next poll, which is surrounding, we're going to get deeper into this a little bit later, but what it's going to focus on is, and I'll launch it as I talk, has your organization implemented technical controls for AI usage? And what this means is, are you guys, blocking it? Are you all, restricting some usage, or have you not even thought about it and it's free? And as Johnny jokingly says here, it's free for all, bots are taking over. So take a quick minute to answer that question. And as we jump in, any comments, Johnny?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because as I've spent time with, a lot of our customer base, people are taking different approaches, and I haven't really been able to pinpoint, industry specific. I think it's tolerance within the organization. If people saying, yeah, we blocked it, right? I'm like, well, how did you block it? Because your folks, your employees are still using it. They're just not using it on your network. They're probably disconnecting from your VPN or using it on the home internet or something like that. So I'm real curious, just from a audience perspective to see where everything lands. And if you see first question was around a written policy to see if you embraced it or you just outright blocking it. Again, kind of company tolerance piece. So I've seen people all over the place. So it's more of a curiosity question on my side, just to see, me personally, even though I'm in the world of security, we'll give some examples later, but I fully embrace it, right? It's going to make, it's going to make our lives better. I think you have to fight the bots with the bots, so to say. But, just curious what people are doing. Are they still scared of it? It's kind of like when iPhones came to the enterprise and most IT teams didn't want anything to do with it. Like, we can't support that. But today it's sort of the, de facto standard. But anyway.
Yeah, so interestingly, smaller crowd today, but no one has any restricted usage or blocking usage. So I find that interesting. And I think as we get deeper into today's conversation, it might give some food for thought, right? And that brings us to our next topic, which is, we keep hearing this term, all these different AIs, but the biggest one I hear is, what is generative AI? So say that 5 times, AI. And, Vid, you have a couple slides here on explaining what that is. And
I would say generative AI is the reason that we're talking about AI so much these days. It's built on these large language models where it's consumed massive amounts of data that it's been trained on. And that allows the AI to be able to start now creating new content based on kind of a predictive model, right? So if you think of as a human, if I gave you a sentence and left out a couple of words, just based on your knowledge of the language, you'd be able to fill in what those words are, right? And that's really what these large language models are doing. And we've gotten to the point now, GPT-3 is where ChatGPT came out. And then now it's on GPT-4. GPT-3, I think, it scored somewhere like 70 or 80% on, passing the bar. And now GPT-4 can actually pass the bar. So, if you went to law school for several years and tried to go pass the bar and you didn't pass it after a few tries, well, now this large language model has the ability to do that. It's got enough information to be able to do that. And that's what's created this whole field around generative AI. And ChatGPT was kind of the first one to come out, with a model that really just kind of went viral, and that's kind of forced the industry to really take notice of what's been going on. It's not new. Some of these things have been around for a few years, but ChatGPT really took off. I think if you look at the next slide, it'll help illustrate a little bit of why that happened. If you look at things like Netflix and TikTok and how long it took them to get to 100 million users, I mean, ChatGPT happened within a couple of months. It went viral because people were just so interested in what it could do that they started using it. And I think that really forced a lot of others in the industry to accelerate their programs. Google had Bard and AI, as projects they've been working on for several years, but they didn't release it until ChatGPT came out with theirs. And they were kind of forced to say, okay, well, if we don't start releasing our solutions now, we're going to be behind. And so this is where you start to see Bard and a lot of other technologies. If you go to the next slide, you'll see kind of where the industry is. So this is just a sample. This isn't the entire landscape of all the generative AI tools that are out there. But ChatGPT is one that people use and they're familiar with. But there's a ton of tools out there that can help you to augment and create code, to be able to create videos, to manipulate audios and images and text and search, building games. So there's a lot of AI tools that are out there that are leveraging some of these large language models along with their own, machine learning tools and algorithms to be able to build things. And that's where this whole generative AI landscape is coming from. I think we got a couple of examples if you want to go to the next slide. So here's an example of Midjourney, which is a tool that's used for creating images. where you can just, type in, build me a game level for a video. If you're building a video game, build me a game level in the style of, dystopian Blade Runner. And what Midjourney will be able to do is generate a unique image based on all the other images of that style that it's seen. And so this is unique content. Each of these images is unique. However, it's built on the large language models of being able to look at and digest a ton of different types of images. And so this is just an example of the power of what this generative AI can do, is that you just type in a few commands of what you think you want it to do as an outcome, and it will go build it for you. So this is pretty impressive in terms of some of the capabilities around generative AI, and this is why people are so excited about it. But that said, there's kind of, there's cautionary tales there in terms of what you can and can't do. The top left, there's an example of an attorney that used ChatGPT in federal court, rather than leveraging their paralegal to go and do discovery on different types of cases that might be relevant. He used ChatGPT and provided that in the court and said, here are some examples of case law that set precedent on, my particular case. The opposing counsel was, confused and say, well, where did you get that information from? And, can you cite the sources so we can go and validate it? He went back to ChatGPT, asked it for the sources, it gave him the sources, and then, he presented that in court. They couldn't find it. And then finally they're like, well, where are you getting this information? He admitted he was using ChatGPT. And the cases that it was using that it generated as examples didn't exist. So it was either hallucinating or it was pulling the data from, a fictitious novel. In any case, the attorney got disbarred. So, trust but verify when you're using ChatGPT. But on the flip side, we have things where generative AI and AI in general is able to predict cancer better than humans, right? It's be able to detect information in images that a human eye can't detect. And then we get to things that are a little bit more relevant for us, when we're looking at cybersecurity. Is it beneficial to us? Is it harmful? What are the implications of generative AI when it comes to IT and security? And I think those are some interesting topics of discussion.
Vid, I'm gonna sort of go off the cuff here and ask you this question, but this is how I've always viewed it: is the two cases at the top, the one with the lawyer and the one with predicting cancer. Those seem like highly dependent on the data sets. One being probably internal data set, where the other is internet, which data is, we all trust the internet, right? I mean, it's our friend. It's all safe. So to me, I think that's a extremely important distinction of where did you get the data and where is it trained from? Because I personally, I stay off the internet as much as I can. I just, I don't trust it anymore. But I don't know if you know any about these particular examples.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. So when we look at, you may look at this and say the top left and say, well, you should never use, generative AI for case law or for in the legal field. If you train the model on all the historical case law that has been tried in the U.S., then you can ask the question for giving precedence, and what would normally take weeks and weeks of discovery and research can take a few minutes. But I think the training model that he used was a large language model that was basically built off of the internet and various data sources. And you're right, the ones where we're looking at in the medical field, the data that it's trained on in the medical field is typically medical cases, medical information. It's not being used to just say, okay, well, ChatGPT, here's an image of my radiology scan that I had. Here's an MRI. Can you predict what ailments I have? I wouldn't recommend that at all. And I think that's key, is that when we talked about those machine learning different options, the data set that you train it on is going to significantly impact the type of results that you receive. So it's great.
Yeah, to me that's always been the key, which I think Pete's going to get into this, but one of the biggest, I guess, risk in my opinion, aside from the privacy part of using the internet-based styles, is the data governance piece, right? Where is the data come from? How did you, what did you use to train it? Can it be trusted? What's the integrity of it, right? If we use the typical CIA triad. But To me, that's, I'm more scared of what Chat GPT will tell me, but if my internal network and my EDRs and all of my network firewalls, all that stuff is what's feeding it, then I can trust that it's pretty accurate, or it's going to be a little bit more, um, you know, I guess, I don't know if accurate is the right word, but I would trust it a little
Relevant.
bit
Yeah.
more. Right, right.
So
Sorry,
Vid,
Pete, didn't mean to interrupt you.
yeah, no, just to interject off the cuff question here. So Vid, is it fair to say that these platforms, so they still have to learn, right? So just like a human still has to learn, but they're going to be able to learn faster. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, when you're leveraging something like a large language model like ChatGPT, the ability for it to adjust the large language model gives it the ability for me to interact with it like a human, right? It understands my language. I'm asking it questions and things like that. But I think in this particular case, the data set of, okay, well, when I ask a question, you can understand, you can interact with me. That's fine that you use a large language model. But the data set that you're going to use to go and curate the answer that you give me needs to be something that is a legitimate data source, right? And to Johnny's point, if you're going to look at it as, I want to scour the data set that, the corpus of data that I'm using for my responses, has to be something that I'm controlling. Right now, it's the large language model and the internet, and a lot of ChatGPT, Bard, and these others now have plugins to say, okay, well, now you can ask me a question. I'm going to go and search the internet for the answer. Well, I don't trust that. So I want to say, well, no, only go search my internal SharePoint site. Only go search my internal database of information as your corpus of knowledge. But the large language model, for it to be able to interact with me and understand my intent, understand my sentiment, understand all those other things, that is part of the large language model that's been trained for it to be more human-like in its interactions with us.
Cool.
So hopefully
I
that
think that's
helps.
the part. Yeah, that's the part for me personally that would attracted me to using it, is truly the conversation piece. So I may not put the right prompt in the first time, but all right, create me, a spreadsheet or whatever it is, the example. And I didn't really like the results. I was like, okay, redo that, but resize the columns or what you can do all of that and literally have that conversation and sort of change your mind or build it out the way that you want. I think coming from healthcare, I've seen, a lot. I mean, there's entire departments that are built around this. Typically it's called something like population health. But the idea has always been, export all the data that's relevant out of the medical record across, your entire patient base and look for the trends. And I can remember times where, the health systems that I worked for were looking for a trend of, why are so many people sick with XYZ disease? Is it localized to an area? And it was great information, but I can tell you each cycle of it was a quarter at best to be able to export the data, go through and massage it and figure out the trends, throw out the anomalies and that sort of thing. So I think from that aspect of it, just purely from a health perspective, and you can sort of, go on and on into all kind of different areas, but just from that alone, hopefully it helps medical professionals be able to get access to that type of data much faster, and it can make better decisions based on wherever you might live or whatever's going on in your whether it's geography or anything like that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's good, and it leads us into our next topic, which is going to kind of deeper dive into the security thoughts and concerns that we have, but also some of the pros as well. And before we do that, I'll launch the poll. So, any in the audience, like if you think about AI, what are your top two concerns around AI? And pick two, and if you pick more, that's fine too. But one of the things that I was thinking about in Johnny is I saw a news report. It was like late last week about there's a new thing where they can simulate your voice and call your loved one and say that you got kidnapped. And so there's like crazy stuff like that. And then it got me thinking, it's like, man, like, so what about all this other stuff that AI can do? And it's just crazy. So everything from, I saw the word deep fakes. It's like, making a picture of you somewhere, right? Is that a fair definition? And then, automated hacking, things like that. So it's just interesting to see how AI not only impacts the enterprise, but also our day-to-day lives,
Yeah, the
Yeah,
generative AI on the audio and video side is advanced significantly. I mean, and the advancements are happening, in days and weeks, not years. There was actually a Drake song. I don't know if you guys heard this, but a Drake song that was released that was 100% generated by AI. It wasn't him. He didn't record the song. It was somebody took samples, and there's enough samples of his voice out there that said, "All right, take his voice sample, and then write a song in his style." So the lyrics, the cadence, his voice, it sounded exactly like him as released. And if you didn't know better, I mean, if you weren't like an expert on every Drake song that was ever released, you wouldn't know the difference. And so, from as an artist, yeah, you could use that to write an entire album, but it does, from a security standpoint, illustrate the risk of, if somebody's recording this webinar, they've got enough content of my voice, they've got enough image of my face to be able to leverage those AI tools to generate a simulation of my voice and my video. I mean, you guys, you might not even know, this might not even be me on this video right now, but it is. But that's kind of the security concerns when we use things like facial recognition, voice authentication, things like that, where we at one point we moved away from kind of some technical controls to say, well, biometrics are unique to that individual, right? You can't fake the biometrics. You can't fake your typing cadence and your voice and your image. And we're at a point now where AI can actually generate some of those biometric footprint that for voice and video at least. So it's interesting when it comes to security concerns there.
I think Pete, on my first experience with true deepfakes was it was actually a couple of different deepfakes that were poised to interview for jobs, and the jobs that they were interviewing for when I was in healthcare were both very, very interesting. Seems like more of a long run tactic from an adversary, but one was an internal audit position, and the other was actually a GRC position on the security team. And so if you think about someone getting, and they used a stolen identity, by the way. So like, whenever the HR and legal teams did the lookups of who is this employee, the background checks, everything comes back clean. Well, now you have a deep fake that's used their fake or their face. And then from there, they went through an interview. It was a really good interview. They answered the questions correctly. There was just a little bit of jitter at the time that sort of threw off some red flags. But just think of it for a second, if someone actually gets hired in any of those two roles, the amount of sensitive information that they would be exposed to, internal audit, all they do is look at everything that needs to be fixed. And, on the security side, high level of access to sensitive and critical data. So it was actually pretty scary at the time. Thankfully, we had some people that, were on their game and able to look at it, from a perspective that this doesn't feel right. So we're going to shut it down. It was interesting. The one mistake they made on the GRC side is the two people that interviewed had the same background, and it was one day after another, and their answers were almost identical. So thankfully, it was the same person doing the interview of the two bots, I guess, and they got very uncomfortable very quick, and then just sort of hung up and shut it down. Then of course, there was conversations with local police, FBI, all that good stuff, but it doesn't really get anywhere. So that was my first experience with deepfake. I figured I'd just share that as an example because, it was one that sort of set me in my place and said, okay, there's good uses for this. And then there's things that we need to do around it.
Yeah, and I think, just now in the day and age of remote work being more prevalent, I would say the majority of my hires have been 100% remote, video calls, phone calls, and it's not until months after they've been hired that we, meet in person. So that's definitely a legitimate concern that you brought up, Johnny. And interesting that you've actually experienced it firsthand. People talk about it as theoretical, but you've seen it happen.
Yeah.
And I think
on the flip side, I can't give a bad example without giving a good, and I know we have some other ones, but I think as efficient as it may make the adversaries, I think that I talked about bots, fighting bots. I think that there's a lot of opportunity, especially for security teams, not just operational efficiencies, but think about using your internal data set. I talked about firewalls, EDR logs, all of that stuff. being able to have a conversation with your quote unquote security digital assistant. But, you know, in the midst of an investigation, or if you're in an incident response moment where you're trying to figure, you know, what did the adversary touch? What did they access? You know, what did this account do? Being able to leverage all of the internal STEM logs and everything that you have and have a conversation with your security digital assistant to be able to go out and return all that information. I mean, I can speak from experience of going through there, you know, in the enterprise that's, you know, typically 5 to 10 people on a call, which takes 30 to 45 minutes to ruffle everybody up and get them on the call, explain. And you have to explain what happened like 5 times, you know, every time someone joins, what are we here for? What are we here for? Um, so, I mean, my personal experience was at roughly the 4 to 6 hour point, we finally got everybody we need to go and look at application logs, you know, firewall logs, and then pull all that back. And then there's a discussion of here's what I see, and I think they pivoted this way. But you think about that from a response or a SOC analyst perspective, being able to pull that very quickly, that's invaluable. Like the response time is everything. You know, the more time that an adversary has in your environment, obviously the more they can do. And it's what we've seen from these ransomware gangs, you know, I think they've sort of not stopped deploying ransomware, because they certainly do, you know, are still doing that. But one of the tactics that we're seeing them change to is more of a, you know, data smash and grab, right? If I can hold your data hostage and make you pay me for that without going through all the attention getters of shutting you down for several days and still get the same amount of money, you know, why wouldn't I be lazy and do it that way? So that, we're sort of seeing that shift in, you know, in the world. So, you know, the response time is everything. And that's just, you know, a real simple use case that I think is, you know, one that could be valuable to security teams.
Yeah,
Johnny,
I mean, AI has actually been used in security for a while now. I mean, if we think about when, you know, our IPS systems and spam filters went from, you know, a rules-based signature matched into more heuristics-based, you know, that was AI and machine learning on the back end that was saying, now I'm going to look for a pattern of behavior that looks malicious or that looks like an anomaly versus looking at, hey, it has to match the signature exactly. So security, you know, companies have been using those types of tools in the past, but I think now they need to get to the point where they're accelerating to start to use some more of the AI in their tool sets for detection and speeding up that response, as you mentioned, Johnny. And I agree. I mean, I think security is always a challenge because it's always that cat and mouse game, right? Is you build a better mousetrap, and then the bad guys figure out some new tools. And the industry is usually the one that's a little bit slower to catch up and start adopting some of those tools. But I am already starting to see more and more of the security companies starting to announce, you know, this how they're using AI and adopting more AI tools within their security portfolio.
Yeah, I think a good example there, Vid, is like the SIM, you know, your security event monitors. I mean, powerful tools, collect a lot of data. Machine learning stuff has always kind of been there. So you can go and do some, I'm gonna call it pseudo natural language, because if you've ever been inside of a Splunk, it's not really natural. So, you know, in my mind, I think there's 2 opportunities there. Kind of what I was talking about earlier is have a conversation where it goes out and we'll do it. Or if you have a specific, you know, run book or use case, that's typically, you know, my experience was to build out a new run book or a new use case for something like a Splunk, put in a request, your security team looks at it, you know, it might take them, you know, a week to get to it. But if you can then just say, hey, ChatGPT, or hey, whatever my AI model is, give me the Splunk query to do X, Y, and Z. And then if it's not right at first, you know, have that conversation with it. And once you get it tweaked, you know, can kind of plop it in. Now you're talking, you know, minutes or even hours versus weeks. And then, I mean, furthermore, tell it to go out and scrub your environment and look for any past indicators with all your logs. So I think those are good use cases.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the model would actually be plugging in the kind of the chat bot, if you will, on the front end of Splunk. So you're not in the front end of your data. So you're not necessarily asking it, what is the Splunk query for me to go get the data? You're just asking it, hey, show me X. And it would then generate that query for you on the back end, query the data, pull it back. And I think that's where that natural language, you know, Q&A that we get out of ChatGPT is where you start applying that model, because those models exist, right? I mean, OpenAI and all these other tools have that kind of front end that you can plug into your back end. And I think that would significantly help security analyst to be able to just ask a question, revise that question, and get the data in seconds for them to do incident response. I think that's definitely something that hopefully is around the corner.
So Johnny and Vid, I'm curious, and just kind of hits me as we're talking about this, like, yeah, there's a lot of good that AI can be used for, but the biggest gap that I still feel is social, like engineering type stuff. So how can enterprises be mindful of the potential for AI, AI being used in that context, right? So, it could be a more sophisticated phishing attack, trying to get inside your, to breach your data, or it could be a simple phone call, trying to mimic something to get money out of you, for an invoice or et cetera. So, what do you guys recommend on the social aspect of it, the social engineering aspect of it?
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny you say that, Pete. We had I've experienced an instance of where what seemed to be not a real person. I mean, obviously the dialect was not South Louisiana, which is where I'm from, and the quote unquote caller, was able to call in to the service center and convince the help desk person that they were, it was a man's voice, but the account, the employee's account was actually a female. And so for whatever reason, they were able to, modify the voice, and they actually, knew things that came straight from social media, to help answer security questions, to reset their password. And then, so I think what you're asking is, obviously it's important, because if you can scrape the information for, an employee list of a particular company, that's a very targeted attack, then you can go scrape information from social media. Is extremely easy to likely walk through password resets and gain access to a company's network. I mean, that's just one thing that I can think of sort of, at the moment, but those are very, very real. It's one of the reasons why I don't do social media, but it's a different story.
Well, that example alone is like, man, I gotta go delete my social.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge, Pete, is when it comes to social engineering specifically. I mean, they're targeting human psychology, right? And as people, we want to be helpful. And when it used to be physical social engineering, that's something as simple as holding the door open for somebody. Well, if you need to badge in and you got somebody running behind you and they look like they're holding a bunch of things, you're not going to slam the door in their face. But no, you need to use your badge to get in. You want to be helpful, and you open the door and you let them in. And that's literally how past social engineering was used to get past physical security, right? It's just, yeah, I'm carrying a bunch of things. I walk up the door and follow somebody in, and they're not going to slam it in my face. So I think that human nature of wanting to help is something that security awareness training comes into play. But I think that now, when it comes to authentication, we're going to really have to start looking at multi-factor. That in order to prove who you are, there has to be other types of authentication, even if it's something as simple as a password reset. So, okay, well, you want to reset your password, I'm going to send something to your cell phone that you need to respond with, right? And so, you see it in the movies where it's like, they've got this technology that can mimic and look like somebody's face. They walk up and, they say, it looks like you, and you say pineapple, and they're like, huh? Well, you need to have a response to that, right? So there's things like that where we may get to that point where you have, as an individual, a secret passphrase or something like that you need to present in order to verify that it is you. So I think it is going to be a challenge, because impersonating somebody's face and voice is going to be easier and easier now with generative AI. So we're going to have to look at other ways to validate somebody's identity, and we're going to have to train the help desk and train other employees that, hey, this is real, and this is out there, and you need to be aware of these new types of attacks. And so awareness is part of it, and vigilance is the other part. We're gonna have to figure out a way to authenticate somebody without their face and voice.
Now, what if we, Vid, it's funny, as we talk about this, it's like my brain is going. And so what if we reversed it? And, Amelia gave a great example last week. They built a virtual agent in 3 minutes. Now I'm a human hacker and I'm calling a virtual agent. would the virtual agent be able to know that, hey, Pete's hacking me, and he's trying to get Vid's information, so the kind of the reverse scenario.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, and I think that's part of the training of the model. I mean, the bots are good at doing certain things better than humans, and there's some things that it's just not as good at doing. And I think in when we talk about virtual agents, and for those that didn't weren't attending the last In The Labs, I think Pete mentioned at the beginning, Amelia is a conversational AI. We talked about impersonating for malicious purposes, but for positive. I mean, think about the help desk. It can help overcome language barriers, right? I mean, people that may have an accent coming from a different region, the AI can take the language. In if I've got an accent, it can take that translate it into a local dialect, and then be able to speak to someone either in their native tongue or in a language that basically makes it easier for them to understand. And so from a call center perspective, if you've got global call centers, you've got a diverse group of folks that call in, if they don't speak English, you could potentially have a call center person speaking in English, and it translates it live to the person on the other end. So I think there's positive uses and negative. But in terms of relying on an AI to be able to authenticate somebody, I think there's going to be some training. There's going to be some policies that have to be into play. And I think what it comes down to, a lot of what Johnny focuses on, is the written policy. And what is the written policy, for your organization from a security standpoint? And then how do you enforce that using the technology, right? So
yeah,
the written policy says you have to authenticate using XYZ, then how do you enforce that, whether with AI or with some other means?
Yeah, and in the example Amelia gave is, they were able to say that, hey, so and so is calling from X, so that's one check mark, and then I think they had like 2 other check marks to verify that the person was who they said they were. But obviously, there's other ways around it. So it's just very interesting. But I guess we'll end cap then on so what does this all mean for us? So what is AI going to do to the enterprise and in general? And should we start looking for new jobs?
I think what's interesting is there were a few significant industrial changes when it comes to technology. I mean, the first one was the internet, right? The advent of the internet changed the way that we work. If we were to say, okay, well, you're an organization that needs to operate today, but you don't have any internet access. I mean, there's not a lot of companies that can be able to operate that way. But we did, like 30 years ago, we didn't have it. So that was kind of the first one. The next one was mobile devices, and that really changed the platform of how we interact, and everything went mobile. And AI is kind of the next big one, right? So I think it's not going anywhere. It is going to be a technology that starts to get adopted more and more within organizations. There's a lot of positive use cases that we've talked about, and I think organizations will start to look at some of those. You've already seen some organizations that have said, hey, we're going to stop hiring until we can determine, can we build an AI to do that job, or augment that job. So companies are going to be looking at these tools to be able to, become more efficient in how they operate. On the flip side of that, it's, we're going to have, just like with any technology or any tool, there's always bad guys looking to leverage it for, for their gain. And so I think we have to understand that, just like Johnny mentioned, I had those conversations around cloud and mobile. Talk to customers like, oh, we're never going to allow mobile devices on our network. Okay, I'll talk to you in 6 months when you do. Same with cloud. We're never putting anything in the cloud, right? And so I think right now the position of, hey, we're never going to adopt AI, we're never going to, I think that would be naive. And so the more you're educated on AI, the tools, the use cases, the good, the bad, I think the better position you're going to be, within the industry to be able to adopt it.
I think the last thing you said is the education part. I think that's important, and I'm going to gear this towards the security and privacy teams that are out there. Yes, you need to you'll need to put in controls to make sure that whatever your written policy and risk tolerance is, that you can control that. Education goes along with it, but for the security teams, I mean, to me, it's really, this is an area that you need to pay attention to, because the adversaries are. So you need to incorporate it into your blue team activities, to be able to make yourself more efficient. I mean, we all know there's habitually a shortage of security professionals. So if you can have bots doing some of this stuff for you, and like the example I gave on just an IR call, being able to cut that down to 15 minutes from 6 hours, that's a big deal. So, stay ahead of it, be aware of how it changes, and then think outside the box of how you can incorporate it into, into your daily operations. And that holds true for any department or any type of role. But I'm going to obviously play the security angle, being the CISO. So I think you have to make it work for you, and so that your staff can have a more meaningful job that they do, and move on to more important work. Let it handle the low stuff for sure.
Cool. Well, don't go anywhere yet, guys. I have a fun question to end cap with this, but before we do, really quickly, who is Alchemy? We are a value-added reseller located across the United States, and our goal is very simple. We want to be the best at what we do, and AI is one of them, right? And so we have a lot of great partners that we work with. We call out a few of them throughout this session today, but you can see we have a lot of great accolades, a lot of clients nationally. And I'll say this, I came from another VAR, and I joined because of everybody I meet is not only just trying to sell you a product, we're trying to be knowledgeable about that product and give you the right decision as an enterprise to implement technologies that make sense. So if you have any further questions about today's sessions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We cover a various areas within what we call our practices. Johnny is kind of oversees our security strategy and does a lot more. Vid runs our office of the CTO and runs what's called our solution architects. And I have the honor and privilege to work with a lot of them. And I enjoy interacting with this group because, one, I'm still a techie at heart, and yeah, I got marketing in my title, but I'll always have the technical side, and have been in this space a long time. But as you can see, we can not only help you get a solution in place, we can help you design it, we can help you implement it. And best part about this is we can also come in and assess your situation. So for example, Johnny's a security guy. We have a great security assessment team that can come in, assess your security posture, and give you good food for thought on things you could potentially do in the next 1, 2, 3 years to improve your security, AI being one of them. So definitely check out the website. And if you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. All right. And with that, I want to thank Johnny and Vid for taking time out of their busy schedules. They're busy guys. And I've been, I wanted to do this session, one, because I want to learn, and two, I want to share the knowledge with you all. And so, fun question for you guys to end cap this. So Johnny and Vid, give me one example you use AI for today, just in your day to day.
Job descriptions. I had to build a job description. I didn't want to build it from scratch, so I asked ChatGPT to build me one. Then I went and asked Bard to build me one, and then I used Bing because I just want to get the comparison. So I took the response they gave back. As Johnny mentioned, I had to go through a few iterations. Now, I just want the technical descriptions and whatnot. And then I was able to use that as a foundation, and then adjust it. But it saved me. It's stuff that I would normally put off because it just takes a long time to build and generate that content. It helped me to streamline how long it took me to do that.
Cool. What about you, Johnny? What do you use it for?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you a little different example. This isn't necessarily a work-related one, but it kind of is. Broadly, it's about education for me. Constantly want to learn. Let me give you a more specific example. Here in the state of Louisiana, the state cyber unit has a volunteer program that when something happens with a local business, if they get hit or something, they actually will call out for volunteers. So I do that in my off time. But a lot of times, they're not looking for a CISO, they have one, or something like that. So what they are looking for is people with some deeper technical skills. So what I've used it for is to try to help, I guess, re-engage myself with, some of the adversarial tactics and how to help in the incident response, gather information, OSINT type stuff. And I came across recently, to be more on the proactive side, a pen test GPT model that someone built. And so from a learning aspect, like I don't know the deep level commands of all the tools, but on the pen test GPT side, I could say, I'm doing a pen test. What are all the things that I need to do? And it'll basically create a run book of here's what you should do. And then I say, well, I don't know this tool, but can you tell me the command? So to give me the command to put in the tool, I plop it into the tool and it'll go out and, do the nmap scan or whatever. I'm just kind of making that up. But so I say, all right, here's the results. What do I do with the results? And it'll tell me the next step. So for me, it's been very helpful to sort of relearn some of that stuff that I used to be intimate with, but have gotten out of over the years. So hopefully that makes sense, but it's more about, a little bit of community service and helping, smaller businesses here in Louisiana and throughout the country that don't necessarily have the expertise for the staff.
That's cool. Yeah. So I use it. So one of the big things I use it for is that, as you guys know, I'm a data guy. So I sit here and look at our data, make sure what we're doing is working. And I'll use it. I have a special saved one where it's called my Excel formulas, and I'll go say, hey, I'm trying to do this, this, and this, and it just boom, it spits it out in 2 seconds. And I'll say this: I've learned more Excel probably in the last 2 months of playing with ChatGPT than I've ever learned, just because I don't have to waste time Googling it or opening a book so just for that one piece alone, it's pretty cool to use it for. And then I'll have it also say, hey, take my CSS code and make sure I didn't mess up anything, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So again, little things, little good things, but then let's be mindful of some of the things that adversaries are trying to do. So again, the guys, thank you for taking time. I know you're busy, and we got to do this again because, man, there's so many more questions I have about this topic. Security, heck, now you got me thinking about, should I take down all my social accounts? Are passwords still valid? Like there's a whole list of questions now. But anyway, we could
Just
go
don't
on
do
for
this, the Facebook surveys. Don't do the Facebook surveys where you say your favorite color, your dog's name, mother's maiden name. Just don't do that.
Yeah. Well, that I don't do. I don't do the stupid cut and paste and all that. But anyway, all right. Well, hey guys, thanks for joining us today. Thank you, audience, for joining us today. And upcoming in the next month and a half, we have a lot of great guests. We're going to be talking Okta, customer identity and access control, so CIAC. We're also going to be talking about Ring Central and UCAS, and then we have XM Cyber and some more security products joining us towards September. And as we get into October, it's going to keep getting good. And I'm going to probably have Johnny and Vid join me later in the year, and I want to do a year-end recap. So I don't know if you guys are up for that, but want to look at technologies over the year, where they went, and then what we could look forward to in 2024. So we're going to have a fun second half of the year with the webinars. And again, Johnny, Vid, thank you for joining us, and have a great day, everybody.